there was a period, and it's been interesting to see the pendulum swing somewhat. So Silicon Valley could do no wrong for a long time where DC is concerned. There's like, oh, you're like the innovators, you're the super value creators, and you're rich as fuck, and you donate to my campaign. So let's just like leave you the heck alone and just sing your praises every chance we get. And then that pendulum has swung because of Facebook screwing some things up and some other problems. So now everyone's starting to turn towards them and be like, wait a minute, like, has this really been like cool that Amazon is, so one of the things that I think Amazon did wrong, there, a bunch of things, but like there's diapers.com where they just lost money on diapers for a while, just like forced diapers.com to sell to them. Like Amazon did that sort of thing.
Just because I know about that story, correct me if I'm wrong.
What's the story? I didn't hear.
They basically, like diapers.com was a popular website. They're selling lots of diapers. Amazon lowered their price below that to the point where they were losing money just to put them out of business. And then they raised their prices back up when they go under.
That's not cool.
I think that's so they go out of business. It was like they come to diapers.com and be like, hey guys, you guys are awesome. How about we buy you? And then diapers.com is like, no. And then Amazon's like, oh, we'll see about this. And then they lowered prices to a point where diapers.com was like hemorrhaging money. And then they were like, okay, I guess we will sell to you now. And then Amazon's like, that's what I thought. And then as soon as they buy them, then the prices go back up.
Is that illegal?
That is illegal, yes.
Or
it's illegal in the sense that it's anti-competitive behavior. It's against antitrust law. So that sort of thing has been coming out now. It's something similar with, and this was like to me the biggest nonsense was when Mark Zuckerberg was asked like, hey, the founders of Instagram were worried that if they didn't sell to you, that you were going to try and put them out of business and outcompete with them. Go into destroy mode, I think was the term they used, destroy mode. And then Mark was like, no, I never would have done that. And then we all know, it's like if Instagram had sold to Facebook, there would have been a freaking like Instagram clone out like that. And so that this is officially, it violates antitrust law to do certain anti-competitive things like that. But the reality is, like, of course, that, if you're in that industry, like, you're going to do everything you can to try and crush anyone who could potentially end up taking your business.
I think you have to assume there's a lot of that going on we don't know of. Any company that gets to be that big, you're looking at the Microsofts, you're looking at the Amazons, you're looking at the Facebooks. You can't, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you get to be that big of a company without antitrust violations?
Without some anti-competitive behavior.
Yeah.
It'd be difficult. And the thing that most people don't realize now, and this is one reason why I think universe-based income is so vital among others, is that some of these companies have essentially just like left orbit in terms of business physics. Like you think, okay, like I'm a company, I need to like, be efficient and treat my workers well and like sell things at a profit. There are some companies that at this point are just like, like I'm worth $1 trillion. I don't even need to make money. Nothing matters. Like, what's that? You're like a cool startup. Like I can buy you for $400 million and everyone's rich and I don't even care. Like they're just so unfathomably big that now like nothing applies. I think Tim O'Reilly called it like super money. It's like at some point you just get super money and then like nothing matters. And then we still try and pretend. And what was funny is when they got brought into Congress, like they pretend too. It's like, oh, we started in the scrappy company. They're like, it's like freaking, at this point, they're almost like countries unto themselves. They're just so staggeringly, enormously wealthy. And they have now at this point, their stock market valuations are propped up in so many ways that they can almost do no wrong. In that environment, they're just going to keep sucking up more and more value. Like the thing I kept saying to folks on the trail was like, look, Amazon's worth $1 trillion, paid zero in taxes, soaking up $20 billion a year in commerce, closing 30% of your stores and malls. And that was pre-crisis. It's like, this thing's like a black hole. It's just going to just suck more and more value in. And we're not going to see anything coming out. And you think it's like, oh, it's because they're like out competing. At some point, they just left orbit. And the funny thing about Amazon is like there have been periods in its past where it didn't even make money. But at this point, you look at it and being like there was a Walmart executive who complained to me. He said, "How can you compete against a company that doesn't even need to make money?" and this was Walmart, which is sort of ironic because Walmart obviously like crushed every like mom and pop retailer in its past.
Now he's complaining about Amazon. That's beautiful.
Yeah, like I joked with the Walmart folks. It's like they were like the tanks that came to American communities around the country and just like ran over every mom and pop. And then they were like, we did it. We conquered America. And then Amazon's like a fucking spaceship like hovering over them. It's like, we don't need to obey the laws of gravity anymore. And then like Walmart's looking up being like, what do we do? And then you have our government over here and like they're just like, you know, the government doesn't understand what is going on and just looking up being like, yeah, like Amazon's a company like any other. That's like they have their own. I mean, if you look at what's going on with Amazon, like Jeff Bezos is so rich, he bought the Washington Post with essentially like pocket change from his couch. Like, you know, like the Washington Post is a very, very influential publication that happens to be like the main news source in our nation's capital. Like, do you think that, you know, he literally, and he has been relatively hands off. Like he doesn't go in and be like, write about this, write about that. But it's telling. It's that like Amazon up here, Jeff Bezos, like, you know, up here. And then like, you know, our nation's major media, like news source for our legislators was like down here, and he was like, yeah, like sure. He just like took a couple $100 million out of the couch and just you know, I mean, he's worth at this point hundreds of billions. Anyway, sorry.
That was fascinating, really, and I think it really
scary too.
It's terrifying. I think that analogy of it's like Walmart came in with the tanks, but they weren't thinking big enough, and Amazon came in with the UFO spaceship and just zapped them.
I keep thinking about the video games you play when you're like you keep finishing and you replay it again with all the upgrades.
Oh yeah, just way stronger every time.
Like ridiculously
I just
strong.
Want to wrap this story because it's, to me, it was interesting. So one of the founders of Diapers.com was a guy named Mark Lore. So then Amazon crushes Diapers.com, absorbs them. Mark Lore becomes rich, but he's mad at Amazon. So he comes back for revenge years later and starts Jet.com. I think he raised like $500 million, $1 billion, being like, we are going to outcompete Amazon and e-commerce. Like he's like, I have found the way. And so then and so he got all of these investors to pile into Jet.com. And then Jet.com is like spending. Do you remember Jet.com?
No. I never heard of it.
So Jet.com, they had, I think their color was purple. They had like Jet and some smiley. Anyway, so Jet.com spends hundreds of millions trying to fight it out with Amazon in e-commerce. And then Walmart buys Jet.com as a way to try and make themselves competitive against Amazon in e-commerce. So that's like how it all fit together. It's like Mark Lore came back for revenge and then ended up like getting absorbed by Walmart in a relatively futile attempt to try and bring down the spaceship.
That's so weird. Why? That's so funny. I guess it never happened. I mean, Walmart failed to make it competitive, it sounds like.
Yeah, I don't think it's worked out.
No.
I mean, like, I'm sure. I don't.
Let's go to Jet.com.
I mean, Walmart had to do something.
Hold on, let's see if Jet.com is still.
I mean, I hope so.
No, it literally redirected to Walmart.com.
Yeah.
I think they paid $1 billion for Jet.com.
Wow.
I'm like, if you can look up that.
Were they just thinking like, look, we can't deal with another one of these? I just wondered.
It was literally to try and bring on Mark Lore to be like the Amazon killer, because if there was like any human that represented,
it was
like
the diapers guy.
Yeah, like the David to Amazon Goliath. It was this guy, Mark Lore, and he had a chip on his shoulder because he was like, "I'm back, I'm back. You destroyed my Diapers.com spaceship, and now I'm back with like Jet.com." Wow. And anyway, I found that story really interesting, in large part because Mark was so compelling that he raised hundreds of millions of dollars for an e-commerce company to try and rival Amazon. I thought that was like the most amazing act of salesmanship I had ever heard. I was like, wow, this guy must like be the most convincing dude in the world.
Well, they all made money. It sounds like by the end of it, except Walmart.
I think that's correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct.
But I think it really underlies this issue of how can we possibly govern in the face of such super money if our regulators and our elected officials don't even understand
They're not even
what they're
aware.
looking at. Like their understanding of what's going on at a company like Amazon is so terrestrial. If they're in outer space, these guys are, on the ground.
Every week I go on
the
Amazon
trench.
now, I find more and more creepy stuff. Like at first they just had a few like Amazon basic items. Now it's
yeah.
like every product that you look up, they already have an Amazon brand that makes it.
It's amazing.
I don't know. It creeps me out every
Yeah,
time.
it's super weird. They have their own brand for literally
For everything.
things as minute as like a pen, a lighter, to as big as like
Any clothing thing you would look up.
like shopping products, everything. They have it.
They're a machine. So what they do is they have this marketplace, and then they have this giant data dashboard. They figure out as soon as like something's selling at a certain level,
Right.
they're like,
They go and
you
make
know,
it.
let's just- they go and make it. And so you have these horror stories of this company being like, I sold on Amazon. I was happy until
Yeah.
one day, like, their competitor came and I couldn't get into the search listings, and now I am dead. And like they're this giant money machine that just comes in, and like it's a combination of like endless resources and endless access to us and our needs, and then endless data. There is no real competition. There's something that has changed about capitalism, and the problem is that we pretend it's still like the 70s and 80s, like that there is like a genuine market between firms when you have these companies that have just reached unprecedented scale, size, resources, and it's being facilitated by this new version of the markets, where there are certain companies that just everyone's going to pile into because they're absorbing more and more of the economy. It's like you look up and just, you ask anyone, it's like, like Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google would be the big ones where you just look up and being like, hey, if you close your eyes and open them 10 years from now, like, do you think those companies will still be kicking ass and dominating? Like the answer is yes, unless the government were to change something for one of those companies. And you're starting to see glimmers of that possibility because people are starting to recognize some of the extremes. I may be part of this conversation moving forward too.
Jeff Bezos just found his worst enemy.
It's
Jeff
not
Bezos.
Mark Lore, Jeff.
You've been looking in the wrong place.
You've been looking the wrong way.
Okay, in closing, I want to ask you one final question. You have endorsed Joe Biden. Tell me, why do you think Joe Biden will make a better president than Donald Trump?
Joe Biden would make a better president than Donald Trump on many, many levels. But the things I love about Joe, number one, he's actually a good dude who cares about people and like wants to do right by people. Number two is he's really not very ideological. He's more of like a pragmatist, where he's like, what are we going to do? And as part of his pragmatism, he's a consensus seeker. He tries to figure out what the folks around him think is the right approach. And he's not going to be someone being like, no, screw you. Like, I'm sure of like the way to go and it's not what you're saying. Like, he'll actually be like, well, if people think that this is the way to go, like I'm into it. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing is something I said at the convention, which is that Joe has this quality where anything he says becomes the new reasonable. Like he came out with a $2 trillion green energy proposal that could have been straight out of the Bernie or AOC playbook. And if one of them had said it, people would have been like, oh, like, aggressive, pie in the sky. But then Joe says it, and everyone's like, yeah, that's cool.
That's pretty funny.
that if Joe gets on board with something or champions it, then all of a sudden it becomes the new mainstream. And so you have to ask yourself, it's like, okay, maybe I disagree with Joe on some stuff, but it's like, what's my preferred path? Trying to convince Joe that this is a good idea, or trying to convince Donald Trump that he should, like, adopt a completely different approach to governance. And I mean, that to me is a no-brainer. Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.